previous hurricanes like Dorian almost ground to a halt, and was one of the problems we had with that system over the Bahamas. So yeah, moving about 22 miles an hour. It may well speed up. That's one of the things as it changes from a hurricane to one of the things that often happen. They do tend to speed up a little bit, so it's likely to get a little bit faster. And a really good question about tomorrow, which I have just lost. Oh no, here we are. Richard Day on Facebook. Will I be okay painting an outside of a house in Essex tomorrow? Richard, yes you will, because tomorrow is going to be a cracking day. It'll be a little chilly. Does that make the paint dry a bit slower? I think it does. I don't know what the paint, but it will be a little fresh if you're up a ladder, but it will be fine and bright. Most places having a sparkling day of sunshine tomorrow, but you will notice a change in temperatures.
Thanks very much, Alex. In a moment, we've got our Deputy Chief coming in to talk about Lorenzo, ex-Lorenzo. Will it become a storm Lorenzo? All of those questions will be answered. But before that, well, Aidan, we've had quite a lot of rain this week. There was a warning in force across southern parts of Scotland, the far northwest of England. I saw a lot of surface water on the roads over the weekend in Cheshire, and now another weather warning in force further south.
Yeah, so the rain that we saw at the beginning of the week, that's moved north, and what we've got now is low pressure centred over southern parts of Britain, and it's within this low pressure where heavy showers now effectively breaking out. And actually there was one really lively downpour out there just before we came on air, and let's zoom in there. You can see the yellow warning that covers much of southern England and Wales, and yeah, just heavy showers for the rest of the day really. That warning in force until 8 p.m. Of course, with showers, they're always hit and miss. They're going to be slow moving as well because they're rotating around the centre of this area of low pressure. And so some areas will see these heavy downpours for quite some time. Surface spray, localised flooding, all of that sort of thing. And then we've got this band of not so heavy but more prolonged rainfall sitting over northern parts of Britain. Showers in the far north of Scotland. In between, there'll be some sunshine for the central belt, southern Scotland there. You can see parts of Northern Ireland as well. But actually further north, we also have a cool northerly breeze, and that is going to replace this system as it all moves through. So let's take that off and put that on and play it through. And you can see that as this low clears away, so the weather warning expires at 8 p.m, and then we get this northerly breeze and cooler air. So it will feel like a change of the month because it will suddenly be quite chilly by night, won't it?
What are your lows tonight then, would you say? I mean, we're talking grass frost in places?
I think there could be, yeah. I think, let's put a few numbers on the map. Min temps, now these are obviously towns and cities. This is raw model output. So yeah, into the single figures widely overnight. But some spots will be lower than these numbers. Some spots will be 1, 2, 3 Celsius. Sheltered parts of Scotland, Wales, Welsh valleys, sheltered areas in the countryside across England as well. 1, 2, 3 degrees. I wouldn't rule out getting a 0 tonight. You know, you could manage it. What do you think, Nick? He's waiting there.
Yeah.
He's done that.
50-50. That's a good tool for weather forecasters, isn't it?
That's why we have him on.
I think the key thing is tomorrow when you're stepping out, school run, going to work, it's going to be quite a shock to the system. Single figures in the towns and cities. It's going to feel very cold. It's sort of layering up, but actually a lovely autumnal day, crisp, some sunshine across many areas, away from that wind, which is looking a bit relentless along that east coast.
Crisp and sunny. A lot of people, I like this kind of weather in the autumn. Beautiful. It definitely make the most of Wednesday because it's by far the best day of the week, isn't it, for sunny skies and staying
That's it.
dry.
We sort of peak midweek and then bang, it goes downhill. Alex, any more comments and questions?
Firstly, we are back up and running on YouTube, so that's good news. You might want to do a quick recap in a moment about what happened because I think they may have missed the first few minutes, so apologies again for that. Sarah Dale on Facebook, we have floods and landslides in mid-Wales. Are we going to get more rain? Well, there's more downpours today. Yes, much of Wales is covered by the yellow weather warning today. It runs out at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow does look an awful lot drier, but then there is still uncertainty about how much more rain you will get. Probably much of Thursday looking dry at this stage, but yeah, the medium to longer term range is for more rain to come. Ryan Lloyd on Facebook, is that depression to the north of Lorenzo likely to sustain it as it travels northeast as well? Actually, interestingly, the interaction between the low pressure systems is crucial, and exactly how the jet stream interacts with the lows. At one point, we thought that the low further north may actually nudge Lorenzo away and it not really get picked up by the jet stream, and it might stay to the south of the UK. Now it looks more like it will kind of push further north, and they'll have some interaction. But Nick will have more on that in just a moment. Johnny Jones on Facebook, please, can we have some high pressure? Johnny, tomorrow's your day for high pressure. There's a kind of weak little ridge building in. Other than that, it looks like low pressure is the main dominant feature. Are thunderstorms more common in the autumn months? Kimberly Bond on Facebook. That's a really interesting question. Actually, the chance of lightning and thunder is more frequent in Manchester in March. I think March and April, because you get the instability of higher up. But obviously you get bigger thunderstorms in the summer when there's more energy around to drive thunderstorms. So it really does depend what kind of mean by thunderstorms. I think they're more frequent in sort of late winter, early spring rather than in autumn. But obviously you get the bigger beasts in the summer months. Please do keep sending your questions in. As I say, we are now back live on YouTube. If you did miss that first bit, then you were just basically going over what the history of Lorenzo and the fact that it is going to impact the Azores in the next 24 hours or so.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Alex. We're now joined by Nick Sixthorne. He's one of our deputy chiefs. He's been on here before. So if you have any more comments or questions directed at Nick after our little chat here, please send them over and Alex will tell us those in just a moment. But first of all, Nick, it's a very interesting time, unusual happenings across the North Atlantic.
Yeah, Lorenzo, like you say, you've already spoke about how far east and northeast it is. Certainly it's such a major hurricane which has set all the records. And that's it now. Not every tropical cyclone or hurricane undergoes an extratropical transition, which is where it moves from the tropics up to the mid-latitudes where the UK is, but this one certainly is, and in the vicinity of Western Europe.
So the big question, first of all, is what's the difference between a hurricane dynamical system and a mid-latitude depression?
Oh, so where to start off, how they're fueled. So in the tropics, MSs are generally what we call barotropic, so it means they've got very little horizontal temperature gradients. Within those, we've also got very, very warm sea surface temperatures, as Aidan shows here. So Lorenzo has originated from much further south down off this African coastline.
What we've highlighted here, Nick, is anywhere above 26 degrees is in these shades of red.
Oh, brilliant.
And that's the key number, isn't it?
That's the key number for forming a hurricane, yes. So when a hurricane or an area of clustered thunderstorms moves over warm sea surface temperatures and conditions are correct, the actual convection, the thunderstorms and showers themselves result in upward motion. And through latent heat release, as condensation occurs in the cloud that warms things up, that actually makes pressure fall and the system become a symmetrical, because it's in an area of very weak temperature gradients, and sort of self-fueling system driven by effectively thunderstorms, which are fueled by the warm underlying sea surface temperatures. And
then that's the other factor you talked about, is wind shear, isn't it? Is very little change in wind direction and with height.
That's correct. Not everywhere the seas over 26 is it favourable for a hurricane. There are little pockets where if there's strong vertical wind shear in the tropics, it will actually tilt the hurricane or the system and basically not allow it to stack up as such, and that results in some sort of interference that will weaken and could even make the storm dissipate when it's over the tropics.
So extratropical transition, that's a phrase, that's a buzz set of words that we use. What is the process?
That's it. So first of all, I should say that not every hurricane or tropical storm undergoes an extratropical transition. It's only a percentage of them. And it is basically when a system becomes from being fueled by thunderstorms, basically warm underlying sea surface temperatures, to its fuel being actually temperature contrast across the system, which is something we're more akin with in the mid-latitudes. So
let's take a look at that happening actually with Lorenzo, because you can see how at the start of this, Lorenzo is over those red colours, it's over those warm seas, and essentially as it moves towards the Azores, it leaves its fuel source, doesn't it?
Exactly. So if it wants to maintain its intensity, as it is doing, it has to source its fuel from somewhere else, and that is what we call baroclinic instability, or effectively it's taking advantage of a temperature gradient among which is the jet stream, which enables pressure to fall in certain areas surrounding it.
So this is the air temperature at about 5,000 feet above the ground, and this shows these temperature contrasts.
That's correct.
And you can see there as it leaves the warm seas behind, it's still got that uniform gradient, hasn't it?
It's actually already undergoing its extratropical transition, or it's a process that started that will take around 24-36 hours to complete. So as it's left, you can see the bold reds, where there's very little temperature gradient across the tropics, and move northwards. It started to draw in some sort of cooler, drier air into its western flank, and that basically means it's no longer a symmetrical system. It's starting to be cooler on one side and much warmer on the other, and that's the first stage in it undergoing its transition to an extratropical system.
And these systems, they can join up and run into the jet stream, can't they?
That's right. It can give them another little kick. When we have these troughs in the jet streams, generally ahead of the trough axis, there's a sense in the lower atmosphere which is making pressure fall. Coupled in with the very warm air associated with that, it can lead to, ahead of it, some very, very stark pressure falls. I mean that Lorenzo, or the remnants of Lorenzo, become a potent mid-latitude mid-latitude system, what you'd call a low pressure.
We've got on the graphic here the moment Lorenzo, and like you say, it's 24 to 36 hours, it's not a moment, but there is a moment on our graphics in which it goes from having the word Lorenzo, or the name Lorenzo, to an L, and here we go. I think it's a midnight, there we are, and it develops weather fronts at the same time. It's magic.
Evidently it's a sliding scale, it doesn't just happen.
Well, you have to choose
a click.
You have to choose a moment on it.
Yeah, it's certainly on the way to this outcome now. Well,
so actually satellite pictures show quite a lot about the transition and the stages of. And in fact, you sent some graphics down to us earlier.
Yeah, let's bring those up because they're really interesting. Slide that back.
Tell us what these are, what we're looking at here.
Grand, so I'll move out of the way. So I've picked 3 systems here. This is actually Hurricane Dorian, which is a prime example of a hurricane. So nice and symmetrical. You can see cylindrical system, cylindrical eye on this infrared satellite picture. I say infrared, which it looks at basically the cloud top temperatures. It's an approximation.
It's not rainfall now.
It's not rainfall. So when it gets colder than -20, which is the sort of the key temperature for thunderstorm activity, where we start to see what you call cumulonimbus clouds, we colour it in so we can see where the cloud tops are high, and where it's dark here, you can see the darks and the whites is where the very highest cloud tops are. So all this is surrounded by deep convection around a central eye, symmetrical in shape, and it's just a classic, beautiful hurricane. And deadly at ground level.
Yeah, exactly. That was a Cat 5, wasn't it, which annihilated some parts of the Bahamas.
That's correct, earlier this year. So in the middle I've got a system that's on its way to extratropical transition, and this is actually the typhoon that's currently in the northwest Pacific. I forget its name, it begins with an M.
Maitok.
Sorry, Japanese pronunciation.
We're all wrong.
Yeah.
So I wasn't.
There's the man in the corner.
That's the Japanese Meteorological Agency.
Yeah.
So this system's on its way. So cool air surrounds the western side of the cyclone, and you can see it's even filtering into the south of the centre, and it's starting to develop what you'd almost call a cold frontal-like structure. Yeah. However, it's not fully undergone its transition yet, because around the centre and around the eye, you can see there's still a ring of deep convection which surrounds it, and it's only once this has died away and there's no longer thunderstorms and deep showers and thunderstorms associated with the eye that it's fully completed its extratropical transition. And then on the far right there, I've got a classic extratropical cyclone, or a low, as we know in the UK. This is one that I took as an example from last year. But this is basically all fueled by a temperature gradient. So you've got a cool polar maritime air mass here. You can see the showers indicated by the bright white tops that are feeding in the northwest, and this warm air mass to its east. And the jet stream runs up actually this edge of the cirrus cloud. It almost follows it. It's a really nice way, beautifully to see. And it's only on this sort of forward left quadrant of the jet stream here where pressure's falling and the surface low is located. But this is purely fueled by a jet stream. So things in the upper atmosphere, strong winds there, as this is purely fueled by the warmth in the seas that lie beneath.
So let's backtrack 24 hours and talk about, hang on, what is this?
So this is backtracking 24 hours and showing Lorenzo as it was a proper hurricane on the left there.
That's correct.
So talk us through this.
So I've got here what we call wet bulb potential temperature. It's basically a proxy to temperature and moisture. So the more purple the colour, the warmer, moister the air is. The lighter the colour, the drier and cooler it is. So we've got Lorenzo here 24 hours ago when it was a full, pure tropical system. You can see it's symmetric in shape. It's surrounded by warm air with very little in the way of temperature contrast. So a beautiful classical hurricane. Yeah. As we move towards Lorenzo now, where it's starting to undergo its tropical transition, you can see we're getting what we call some baroclinicity across it, with cooler, drier air wrapping into the western side of the circulation with the warmer air across the east. This is undergoing the process now of starting to form cold fronts, and the drier, cooler air making its way towards the warm core or the centre. And this is it where it's fully undergone its extratropical transition on, I think that's late tomorrow, late Wednesday, where by this point we've fully formed a cold front, warm front, or one front up here even. You've got like a little internal system there, and it's gone completely extratropical. And this is purely by this point being fueled by the jet stream.
Ah, right. Okay.
And we have something else that you sent us literally 10 minutes before, so I've not looked at this, no idea what this is.
So we use a variety of tools from model data to work out, is it purely tropical, is it undergoing a transition, or is it extratropical? And this is one little graphic that shows it's a characteristic of a tropical cyclone are that its strongest winds are in the lowest portion of the system, and the winds get weaker with height. As if you look at a mid-latitude low pressure system,
the way around.
Completely the opposite way around. So on here we look at a process we call thermal wind. Effectively, the further you are this way on the graph, the stronger your winds are in the low levels compared to the upper levels. The further that way, vice versa. And the 0 degree here indicates a change basically where the upper winds become stronger than the lower winds. So that's that axis. This one looks at the symmetry of the system, so how cold's the air in the direction the system's moving on the left and on the right. And if it's similar around 0, so it's a nice symmetrical system, it sits down here at the bottom of the axis. And if it's asymmetric, what you'd call the extratropical cyclone or mid-latitude low pressure system, it will end up on this part of the scale. So it's a really nice way of us seeing when is it becoming asymmetrical as the cold air is ingressing in it, and when is that flip happening where the jet stream becomes more dominant than the low level winds for Lorenzo. So
is it midnight Wednesday night as per the graphics where it goes from Lorenzo to L, is that right?
Around about then. So the NHC will officially declare it post-tropical when deep convection, which is associated with the centre of the cyclone, ceases. When there's no evidence of that any longer, that's in satellite imagery, that's where it will be called. But this is a very good guide to when that will happen. So you can see Lorenzo, at the present time now actually, it's already starting to become asymmetrical. So we know as it's left this red quadrant and it's moving for the purple, it's started its extratropical transition. But only once then it moves through this slightly sort of faded boundary, which I think is on Wednesday at some point, and it becomes asymmetric, and these upper level winds become dominant over the low level winds. Is it fully completed its transition and is a mid-latitude low pressure in the North Atlantic, somewhere to the southwest of the UK.
Very good, excellent.
And you can pick up these from Florida State University on the web. They're available to anyone. But yeah, an absolutely brilliant tool to
so much information there. People wonder why we make a big deal about the fact that it's a hurricane and then it's low pressure if it's just going to bring us some wind and rain, which it will essentially. I mean, there's two main reasons, isn't there? First of all, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And secondly, they're more difficult to predict, aren't they?
Yeah. A hurricane, the tropical air associated with it wraps around the centre, mean that the rain-bearing nature of a hurricane is way above anything you could expect in an extratropical cyclone or a mid-latitude low pressure. And also, when it becomes interactive with the jet stream and it's not fueled by sea surface temperature anymore, it's much. I'd say in some ways it's easier to predict, because this is almost like a cork in a bottle. It interacts very little with the atmosphere around it. It's almost like a self-fueling thing, and it's only been very slowly steered by weak currents in the tropics. As when it runs up here in the jet streams, which we've got aircraft that buzz across the Atlantic and sample these constantly, it almost becomes more predictable once it's undergone its transition and becomes into this, and our weather models do better with it. So modelling when this transition will happen, how quickly it will happen, is something that we've historically and still to this day struggle with, and it is a weakness in forecasting.
And that leads on to the impacts it will have across the UK and when and if, etc. So what are we looking at here?
Well, these are so 48 hours ago, this was what we call an ensemble of computer models were predicting. So every one of those lines is a model run from a member of a computer model. So we run the computer model 30 times, don't we?
That's it. We give it slightly different starting conditions. They're all possible, but they're not the best analysis. We slightly what we call perturb it and make it different. And then when you run it forward, you get an idea of the sensitivity. So small differences here, can result in vast differences in.
So the far left one, that's 48 hours ago, and you can see huge spread by the time it gets to some of them are saying it will go to Greenland, some of them were saying it would go into the Bay of Biscay, a lot of them were saying UK. So that was 48 hours ago. But it's become a lot less spread, hasn't it, by the time we get to now? That's 24 hours ago. This is the most recent set of runs.
That's it. Confidence has increased, as it often does as you run to shorter and shorter range time. And a key one that one of my colleagues found yesterday with this is actually the modelling of some elements of the jet stream across Arctic parts of Canada and North America at the present time. And as these areas have moved from the remote areas of northern Canada towards areas that are sampled more by observations, things such as that, and a better sampling for satellite imagery, I think that's given us more confidence that these have been modelled well. It's how these interact with this, its speed of acceleration, that then allows us to be more confident in the outcome. Although there's still a little bit of spread, the confidence has grown that you'll end up with an extratropical cyclone or a deep low pressure system somewhere sitting to the west of Ireland by the time you reach Thursday.
So that's when it could influence the UK weather as it starts to track that way. Okay, let's have a look again. This is Lorenzo.
So this is going through Wednesday, the good weather day for the UK. Most places sunny.
The jet stream, are these really sort of these arrows here?
Yeah, so it's picked up by the jet stream, isn't it, Nick, at this point?
This trough you can see here starts to influence it and goes through a deepening phase. When you reach this point, this trough is starting to cut off, and you see the jet becomes basically dominant to the west of the system, and it becomes almost slow moving here, so there's very little forcing upon it. So once you get beyond mid-Thursday, it's undergone all its deepening that it pretty much can, and then we're just going to end up with a system that's filling. It could actually fill quite quickly as it then transfers in some sort of east or southeastward direction across the UK. So it's becoming shallow the whole time, the winds around it are becoming lighter as it makes its way towards us, but still quite potent to the west of Ireland.
Okay.
This is Thursday evening, so let's run through Thursday night. Wind and rain pushing into initially Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, isn't it?
That's correct.
And then we're likely to see through Friday daytime the wet and windy weather.
But you can see it filling the whole time, so the isobars are shrinking in, the winds on its southern flank get weaker.
I will talk a moment about possible impacts for the UK and weather beyond Thursday, Friday. But are there any questions, Alex, from people?
About temperatures. So bringing tropical air, people are asking, is it going to get warm? Is it going to get muggy like we often do with these weather systems? And certainly compared to the cooler conditions we're going to experience on Wednesday, it's going to be quite a big jump.
Yeah, certainly ahead of it there'll be a short-lived warm tropical maritime air mass that will be drawn up somewhere across the western parts of the UK. It is actually signalled to occlude out, so that's basically where the warm air gets lifted up off the surface as it runs eastwards. So certainly not tropical.
So it might not last too long.
Yeah.
Really good question for you, Nick, while you're here. Philip Matthew O'Malley on YouTube. As a loyal viewer from Ireland, does the Met Office ever use the Canadian weather model? Because that's got a different track for Lorenzo, skirting it across the Atlantic seaboard where he lives in Canada, should he be concerned. We do look at a lot of other computer models, don't we?
It is. We look at many of a National Met Services model, and the GEM, as we know it as the Canadian model, is one that we consult as well. But when you're looking at these things, you look at a whole range and you look for similar themes within them, and you're trying to come up with, every run differs. Some are outliers and they sit a long way away from the average or the consensus, as we call it, of most models. And we try and stick towards the consensus. And it's not just picking models randomly. We'll often look now and see how's that model handling the weather or various features now, 6 hours, 9 hours after it's run. And sometimes we can almost strike out models and say, we've got less confidence in that because there are evidently errors in the key zone at the present time. So that lowers our confidence in its evolution. Whereas if a model does well with that, we may give that one extra weight in our actual preferred forecast.
Really interesting. And a good question from Chris on YouTube, actually, which is related to computer models. How far have the technical advances in weather forecasting come since Michael Fish's no hurricane faux pas 32 years ago? Well, hugely, Chris. In short, the supercomputer used back then in 87 to forecast or not forecast that was less powerful than this, than the mobile phones that you carry around today. The current Met Office supercomputer does 14,000 trillion calculations per second. Per second.
Okay.
14. So for every man, woman and child on the planet, there's 2 million calculations per second done by the supercomputer that's in this building.
That's brilliant. We need to talk about the UK weather. Nick, thank you so much.
For your time.
I know you were very busy. That was Nick Silkstone. He's one of our deputy chiefs. He's going upstairs now to look at the weather. Aidan, let's talk about UK weather, shall we? Not only Thursday, but beyond that as well.
Well, through Thursday and Friday, obviously, we've got the wind and rain pushing into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, risk of gales, especially around coasts. But another thing worth mentioning, and for the Republic of Ireland as well, this is important, is the high seas. Really big swell associated with this system. It all depends on the timing of it as well, because if it coincides with high tide, then it will be a much bigger impact. But yeah, certainly something worth keeping an eye on for the Republic of Ireland, but could also affect northwestern Britain as ex-hurricane Lorenzo arrives on Thursday night. And then into Friday, the strongest winds at the moment, and there's still some uncertainty about Friday in terms of its depth and its track, but at the moment it looks like it could be the Bristol Channel that sees the strongest winds and the biggest swell. But again, it depends on the timing of this thing as it moves through and whether it coincides
We're
with high
about
tides.
a week after equinox, but even so, the tidal range just a week ago was about 15 metres, so it's still quite significant. Neaps are another week away.
Yeah. You can see by this stage, though, it's a fairly flabby low, nothing like a hurricane by this stage. It's sitting over southern Britain, and it basically just dies away, decays into the near continent, and so we're likely to see wind and rain replaced by showers, and then, well, something else brewing out to the west of us. Now let's pause it there. At the start of the weekend, a lot of people by this stage thinking about the weekend, and we're getting into a setup that starts to look like a winter time setup, aren't we? Where we've got a Scandinavian high, which can be quite dominant in the winter, and then we've got this Atlantic low, and we often see in the winter a battleground between these systems. Makes it more difficult to predict timings and so forth, and that is the case this weekend. So let's play that through. So this is going through Saturday and into Sunday, and you can see as that low to the west comes up against the high pressure over Scandinavia, it really slows down, and that's important because there's a lot of rain on that system, some strong winds as well. So wet weather pushing in from the west through the weekend. Some heavy rainfall likely, but it could become slow moving. Timings are uncertain, and we don't need more rain, do we?
No, we don't. Rivers are swollen. There's been, where I live in Cheshire, there's been a huge amount of rain, and some of the roads have been sort of flooded. So yeah, it's not a great scenario. We need a little bit of a gap in our wet weather, but it doesn't look like that for this weekend.
No. So it's not the case necessarily that the wettest weather will come with the ex-hurricane Lorenzo. Certainly it will bring some rain, and wouldn't be surprised if there are some impacts from that rainfall. Stay tuned if you're concerned that there may be weather warnings issued closer to the time when we firm up on the details. But into the weekend, more wet weather on the way, and it could be slow moving. It could actually be heavier than the rain.
And interestingly enough, September was quite wet, wasn't it? Have we got any stats for September?
It was wet. It was not only wet. Let's switch to our stats timeline.
Oh.
It's got its own timeline. Yeah. Hot off the press. September stats. Here we go. There we are.
Ah, okay.
It was wet, but it was also sunny.
Oh.
Yeah, right. And mild. So the temperature, only slightly milder than average, but the mean temperature there is on the left, and actually that's the mean minimum temperature. I put the wrong map in, but it says the same thing. Essentially, it was slightly milder than normal. In the middle there, that's the rainfall amount, and yes, some strong blues there indicating above average rainfall through the month of September, up to the 29th of September there. Not many places lower than average rainfall, but certainly the wettest areas, as you already alluded to, Claire, northwest England there, southwest Scotland, South Wales, southwest England, and it was also sunny at the same time as being wet, which isn't that common, according to Dr. Mark McCarthy when we spoke to him earlier. So yeah,
and in fact, August was warm and wet as well, wasn't it? So what are the numbers for October?
These are the averages for October. So what can we expect for average weather through October? Because we're always talking, aren't we, about, temperatures at the moment are higher than average or lower than average. What are the temperatures typically for October? Obviously, they change through the month. They don't actually change that significantly, do they, from the start to the finish? Now, the left map there shows the maximum temperatures, the average maximum temperatures for October, and you can see they're typically around mid-teens across much of England and Wales, away from high ground, into Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, more like 12, 13 Celsius. So those are the kinds of numbers through much of October you'd expect by day. And then the average minimum temperatures, mid to high single figures generally, so kind of what we're expecting tonight in towns and cities. And rainfall amounts, this is the total rainfall for the month. What's more interesting here is the distribution, really. So you can see the strong blue colours there across Western Hills, and much drier across eastern Scotland, eastern parts of England, which is the case for most months of the year.
Alex?
Lots of questions coming in. Chris Proto, is there any news on the QBO? Now, we did talk about this last week. I think we'll save that for another show because this one is already overrunning a little bit. A few comments about getting too technical with Nick and people not being able to understand the stuff and saying, oh, we'll just get on with the weather. Well, actually, that's kind of what this program's for. It's about the detail, about the meteorology. But thank you for your feedback. Do please keep your comments coming in. Love them. Whether they be positive or negative, we do read them and we will bear that in mind.
I think I said in one of those comments.
Did you say it was too
technical?
Too technical. How confident are we on the position? Well, more confident, as we've discussed on Lorenzo. It's going to bring a wet and windy spell at the end of the week. Exactly how wet and windy, still too early to say. So the message is still stay tuned to the forecast. And a comment that we had earlier on from Gaz Milton on Facebook. When will you get the weather reports right? Which is, I think it's a little hard. I mean, Gaz, if you watched the 10-day trend from last week, you'll know that we were talking a week ago about Lorenzo hitting at the end of this week, so that's pretty good going, I think. So
is that one you did?
Well, I didn't want to name names.
You talked about the one 2 weeks ago.
The one 2 weeks ago that you did was that was equally as accurate. So I don't think we're that bad, guys. But thank you for your comment. Do keep all your comments coming in. We do love reading them, whether you're watching this live or afterwards. And any suggestions for other features in the show are also more than welcome.
So Alex, October record-breaking temperature.
Yes. Talked about this at the start, didn't we? I'm not sure if anyone's commented about what the highest temperature was exactly 8 years ago on this day in October, and it was?
You tell us.
29, almost 30 degrees Celsius, 29.9 degrees Celsius. That was the top temperature we've ever seen.
And why do you remember that temperature?
It was my granny's birthday. My granny's 90th birthday, actually, and we're having a big celebration. It actually wasn't her birthday, it was like the weekend after, but I remember it well because it was really warm. And we got to 29.9 degrees Celsius at Gravesend.
There we go, which wouldn't happen nowadays.
No, because we don't use Gravesend as an observing site. But other stats.
Which one do I need to press for that?
Press the top one for that one, so that's the top temperature. And then, yes, other stats for October, the records, Wales, that was the same day, so it was 2011. The Scotland record, I believe, just going to double check, was something like 1908. Yes, so, and other stats for October, the lowest temperature recorded, that was also in Scotland, -11 towards the end of the month. The strongest, the wettest day ever in Northern Ireland was also in October on the 31st, 159 millimetres, that was back in 1968. And of course...
remember last year we had Nick Graham, ex-meteorologist from the Met Office, on to talk about the hailstorm in Ottery. That was in October. And he said that if we had reliable rain gauges, that could be the UK's wettest day on record, but we didn't have reliable rain gauges in Ottery St Mary.
Only
I think that's enough for today.
Oh, one more.
Oh, hang on.
Let's got a plane to catch.
Thoroughly depressing fact, just to end, we're losing 4 minutes of daylight a day at the moment.
So depressing.
And that trend continues obviously through October. By the end of October, what will the sunset time be in Birmingham?
Okay, that will be probably 5:37.
Earlier. Because we're losing now, don't forget.
Oh, yeah.
So it will be the sun will be setting in Birmingham by the end of this month at 4:40. There's a cheery note.
Oh.
But then some people love cosy nights.
Yes, we do.
We ran a poll on Twitter, and actually the cosy nights or long summer evenings was very close over the course of the weekend.
Thanks very much, Alex. Amazing facts from Alex Deacon yet again this week. Thank you very much for watching. Who is doing the 10-day trend tomorrow?
Me.
It will be verified by all our lovely audience, so you better get it right, Aidan. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Stay up to date with the forecast because things could change yet again. Obviously, we'll keep you posted on all our social media channels and our YouTube channel as well.
That's all from us. Bye-bye.